Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. If you follow me here, you may have noticed I've been a little bit quiet as I've been kind of out of town for about a couple of weeks on and off, but I'm back today with the first challenge over at the Counterfeit Kit challenge, which is to use shaker boxes. So we will talk about what those are, and I have a couple of other techniques, including making this tall drink glass, making it shine, and also making our own little paper straws. So let's dive into the first step of that shaker box, which is basically a back and a front element that you can stitch or glue together, and then you can fill it up with shaker bits. I've got these cute little fruit shaker bits here that I believe I got from a Scrap Happy Finisher's Prize at one point. If you don't know what Scrap Happy is, I will leave you links below to explore on your own to find out what that membership group is all about. I am going to start these shaker boxes off with scratch plastic. So this was a package of cardstock paper that I had gotten recently in an order. So I'm just trimming off all of the sealed edges to this so that I just have a single sheet. And I'm going to cut those sheets down to slightly bigger than the stamp image I'm going to use to create my shaker. Now you don't have to stamp on these for sure. You could just die cut like larger shapes like hearts or stars, something along those lines. But I really wanted to use a shaker jar image because it goes well with the story I'm going to tell. I should have lined up my plastic down in that bottom corner, but since plastic is a little tricky to cut on the trimmer, it can wibble and wobble on you. My edges didn't feel quite as straight, so I was worried that it wouldn't line up in that corner very well. So I attempted to line it up with some grid lines, and as you can see, it stuck to my stamp and peeled it up. That is a challenge with this permanent stays-on ink, which is an alcohol-based ink. It tends to be a little tackier. But I managed to realign it and do a second stamp over that to get a nice crisp image, and it did okay. This is an imperfect technique here, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. I will then line up these plastic images on top of some pattern paper. You can do whatever paper you want in the background. Something that is subtler helps the shaker bit show up better, so just keep that in mind. And then I took it over to my sewing machine and I stitched it. Now I did hold it in place with some temporary adhesive just around the excess of the edges, so that it would stay in place while I took it to my sewing machine. You can just glue these down, and I will talk a little bit more about that in a minute, and then I'm going to fussy cut them. But again, dies will work great for this as well, especially if you have a stamp and die set. That is a good option. Now, these don't have a lot of thickness to them, so you don't want to put a lot of shaker bits in there. And in fact, as I was filling this up, one of the shaker bits kind of tipped up sideways, and it was popping up a wrinkle in my stuff, so I had to maneuver it down and then make sure everything was kind of shaking around a little bit. These won't shake a lot, not as much as a regular shaker card or anything, but they're still fun and pretty. So if you're going to glue plastic, you add the glue and then set a weight on it and leave it aside to finish drying. It will take much longer to dry on plastic than it will on paper. In the meantime, I am moving on to this kind of drink cup technique. And at first I thought I was going to make the drink cup out of this piece of paper, but it turns out that was going to be too short for the whole design of my layout. So I swapped out pieces of paper, and I think this one is going to be wide enough to give me a nicely proportioned drink cup from top to bottom and side to side. So I'm going to mark this at the bottom, and that will give me, I just moved it in an inch from the edge, and that will give me a slight angle when I cut from one corner to that mark. That will give me a slight angle to mimic a drink cup. Now, drink cups have kind of curves to them, so I'm going to hand draw and trim. I'm just kind of trying to hold my hand still and just move my wrist so it kind of acts as a compass, so I can just kind of draw this curved edge and then hand trim them out to get more of a look of a drink cup. And I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to ink up these edges just to kind of help them pop a little bit. Now, the technique I wanted to share was using some embossing powder, but I couldn't find my embossing ink when I was filming, but I will get back to that because I do find it later. In the meantime, I am working some of these layers and pieces, and I'm going to make everything temporary here. Both I am putting down foam dots, or foam strips, but I am not applying the adhesive to this piece of paper yet. I'm using some temporary adhesive that's just kind of hidden under there, and temporary adhesive on everything else until I can find my embossing powder to finish that technique. So I start putting everything else in place. I did put one sticker down permanently. I will have to move that one later because I do shift some things around a little bit later in the process. But I've got my 2 little shaker cups down there, and so those are ready to go. And I am moving on to creating a little paper straw. Now, I haven't really done this before, so I'm trying to figure it out as I go. At first, I thought cutting perpendicularly across the stripes would be the way to go, but as I start twisting that paper around a pencil, I'm finding that it's not creating that kind of diagonal stripe that a straw has. Or imagine a striped candy cane. That's the look I'm going for. So I cut my strip the other way and I start twisting it, but I realized that I need to rotate it around because my green strip was wider than my white strip, and so it was covering up all the white, and I was just ending up with a green straw. So you have to get 2 different colors stripes next to each other. It's helpful if they're about similar in width, but I made it work with my narrow white and my wider green, just making sure that the white is overlapping the green so that you have space to offset that. And I pre-curled it around my pencil, and then I went back and added little dots of glue, just kind of every wrap of the pencil. Now, if you put enough foam tape in there, you can leave that straw as a nice circular straw, but I wasn't sure how this was all going to go, so I just went ahead and flattened my straw now because it might squish down later when I'm trying to file this album away. So I'm just going to go ahead and smash that down, and it does allow me to kind of place it over where I did put some of the foam tape already because I like that alignment, and I didn't think about that ahead of time. So if you want to have that nice round straw, think about if you're using any other foam tape and place it around your straw when you're designing your layout. All right, I have moved on to all of the extra bits and pieces here, and here's where you can see I'm moving that sticker. Luckily, it was behaving for me, and I didn't have to worry about it too much. Now, what I should have done in the first place was detack it and put some temporary adhesive on it, so I am doing that now. Oh, it looks like I did tear off one of the little leaves, so I am going to carefully peel that up with some tweezers. And then I do manage to get it back into place well enough. There was some torn bits left on my skin after that, but I'm okay. I got it well enough. All right, getting everything back into place so that I can finish the design of this layout until I have a chance to go and look for that embossing ink. Notice I am overlapping some of my photo mat there. I don't have a photo yet because this is a story about my husband, and he always kind of cringes when I pull out the camera. But look, I found my embossing ink. Guess where it was? Right in front of my face. So I managed to get this going on. I'm just going to work through this very quickly. I'm going to smush embossing ink over the entire surface of this drink cup. I do have a scratch piece behind me to catch the excess ink. I have another scratch piece to catch the excess embossing powder because I don't want to use that inky scratch paper because it'll just waste some embossing powder. So I put on a lot at the top and I just kind of shake it down very carefully. I will pick up and sprinkle and cover any spots that it seems like I missed and then tap it off. I will go ahead and heat up the whole thing. I will kind of do this in strips so that I can be methodical about getting all of the covered surface. And if I work in stripes, I'm less likely to have missed gaps in this whole process. Now, this can take a little bit of time, so just kind of be patient with it and go slowly and just line it up well. I do tip it in the light when I'm done because anything that didn't melt properly will look cloudy. So I will take some heat to those cloudy sections and make sure I fully melt those. And one spot that I know that I will have to repair is where I'm holding it with the tweezers. Luckily, the tweezers just kind of squished the embossing powder in place and didn't rub it off completely, so I could just heat it and set it. But if it has rubbed off, go ahead and sprinkle on some more powder. Now, this whole heating process kind of curved the cup the opposite direction that I want it on my page. I want it to curve away from the viewer because that's how cups in the physical world curve. So I did physically, manually kind of curve it a little bit. I'm going to heat it ever so slightly to reinforce that curve. I don't want to completely melt that embossing powder again because that can cause it to soak into the paper and lose some shine. So I just want to heat it up enough to make it flexy so that I can curve it back away from the viewer. Now, when I adhere this down to that foam tape, I'll lose some of that dimension, but if I get the edges to curl, that should just ever so slightly curl away from the viewer and give it just a little bit more of a 3D look. All right, with that final technique done, I can permanently adhere everything down and add any finishing touches. And like I was saying before, that photo mat, I've overlapped some things, but I have not glued those things down. And that way I can slip the photo underneath those extra little bits once I get it printed. So here I leave you with a few close-up looks at all of this. I really like this layout. This is something very different than what I would ever do, and that is part of what I love about the Counterfeit Kit Challenge. And if you want to join us for kit building and idea inspiration for layouts, I will leave you links below. Until next time, I hope you have an artful day.